In the escalation league between Sean and myself to put together new 40k armies, we each have a little something to report. I have 28 finished minis, which brings me up to 550 points of Warhammer.
And I've got 10 models here, which is 640 points, which is more than that.
Yeah, Kroot are expensive in dollars and very cheap in points. But now that we know what we're doing with our schemes and we got some experience under our belts, it is time to turn these smatterings of miniatures into playable forces. Speaking of playable, we're gonna be playing some Combat Patrol. There is a Kroot Combat Patrol, it's in the White Dwarf, and knowing how horribly unbalanced Combat Patrol is and seeing the things that I get to have in my Combat Patrol, I feel like it's gonna be an easy Kroot victory. I have been a good little boy. I got another 10 Kroot Carnivores done and a really good start on another pair of Krootox Riders. Even though I painted a bunch of models, it's still just a drop in the bucket. But at least I've got something in my bucket.
Since the last video, I've built everything in the starter box and the Combat Patrol. I haven't gotten too much painting done. I've only done the other half of the Noise Marine squad that I worked on in the first video, but I'm planning to come back strong this week. It's been exciting working on a whole brand new army. It's really different from Guard, so it's interesting to see all the little extra details that go into a Space Marine. These are actually the first Space Marines I've ever really painted. It's definitely quite a way to jump into painting Space Marines.
I'm gonna be painting up all of my Kroot Rampagers, my Krootox Rampagers. These are the guys that made me want to collect this army. Because Kroot are cool, but Kroot aren't the most exciting thing. They're not as exciting as Kroot riding Kroot that do mortal wounds on the charge.
This week I plan to come back strong and paint up the whole Combat Patrol. I already know how to paint most of it, like all the Infractors and another Lord Exultant, but I'm planning to do a little something different for the Flawless Blades because they're special. When I've had another Lord Exultant painted, I'll have 2 of each Lord in the army, except for Lucius and Fulgrim.
I got 9 of these suckers to do. It's kind of a lot of models that are kind of a lot, but I am excited. If I can get these guys done, then, my army is gonna be very, very playable. I still need to get these onto some bases. Each of these guys stands on a 50mm base, so I have a lot of square footage to get through. I've been putting these models together in the evenings, and they are a lot. Each Krootox is 15 parts each, and the Rider is another 5 or 6. And I had to do a lot of gap filling. These guys are natural monsters, so I don't want to see any seam lines. I'm pretty sure any Rider will fit on any Krootox, but I don't want to glue them down just yet. I need the bases done to really know which Rider will look best on which beast. I broke out my bases and all of my cork, 1/2, 1/4, and 1/8 inch. I started out using some ultra thin super glue and randomly applying some cork. Once I had my little towers built, I picked up a guy and tried out seeing what he looks like. Once I was happy, I glued him down and continued filling up the bases with more cork. My Krootses are wandering through a desert with a lot of cliffs. Once I had all my Krootoxes standing, it's time to make this cork look more natural. I broke out the wood putty and smeared this on over the bases, doing one thick coat. Then I used a tongue depressor and my fingers to pull off a lot of the goo, and then I used a wet paper towel to pull off the rest so it blends the cork pieces together and smooths everything out, turning the cork into a nice windswept rock. With the bases done, I now know the poses and can finish off these riders, dry fitting them on a place and getting their heads and arms arranged nicely. Now I'm going to paint these in sub-assemblies, but it'll be important to know which rider went with which horse, so I took a picture of each guy so that once the painting is done, I can look back and figure out who's who. And I have some more sub-assemblies. Each Krootox gets a shoulder pad, and I use some double stick tape and a tongue depressor to set these up for airbrushing. Now the putty has had some time to dry, I went through my epic basing cactuses that I made Sean 3D print for me, and I found some that would look good. I super glued these down. On these bigger bases, I can get away with some of the bigger cactuses. And then I took some desert sand texture paste and I smeared this over the low parts of the bases. The build actually wasn't that painful. Usually the building takes the longest, but I am only at 5 hours. Today, I spent the last 3 evenings also working on putting these guys together, but now they're done and in front of me, and I have a full squadron of warbirdies. I recently painted up a different flavor of warbirdie, the Krootox Rider, the shooty version of the Kroot Rampager, and I really like how they turned out, but it was a lot of really fussy painting. After I put on the speed paints, I kind of painted everything again with opaque paints, and I like how it turned out, and I would be willing to do this 2 or 4 times, but I don't know if I want to do it 9 times, and then potentially another 9 times if I ever want to bump these 3-man squads up to 6-man squads, so I want to find some other way to tackle these guys.
I actually got my models built on time so I can get right to painting. These Infractors are a lot like the Noise Marines I've already painted, so I have some experience. I just need to translate it to guys who are a little less noisy and a little more stabby. Eventually, I'll need a bunch of these guys, but for now, 10 will do. I started out dry brushing them all with a dark gray, and then a mid-tone gray to make the black prime look more distinct. Then comes the hard part, making some of these parts white. This is basically the worst case scenario. white over black. But luckily, there's not a lot of white on these guys, unlike the Noise Marines, so I lucked out. Not too much white, but there's one hard part to paint still, the trim, and there's definitely a lot of that. First, the base coat with a dark gold. They might have less than normal Chaos trim, but there's still a lot. After layering coats of dark gold, I hit the high spots with some bright gold. This took some serious time to get it all looking good, but still not as long as Jay spent finishing building his models. Looks like I'll be comfortably in the lead. Now that the really laborious stuff is done, it's time for the fun, getting some pink on there. I started out looking over each guy and making decisions on what pieces I want to pink up. I put dots on the armor spots so I have a map to look at and I can just turn my brain off and paint my guys pink. This step really helps them feel a lot more finished, and a lot more Emperor's Children-y. The reason the Emperor's Children are pink instead of pre-heresy purple in the lore is because after the invasion of Terra failed, some Emperor's Children were fighting Death Guard in the Eye of Terror. During the fight, the Death Guard sprayed chemicals on the Emperor's Children, which didn't kill them, but did dye their purple armor a bright pink. The Emperor's Children then killed all the Death Guard. Don't tell Jay I said it's easy for Emperor's Children to beat Death Guard. He'll get upset. Now the pink is pink, but that's still not pink enough. I used some fluorescent pink to really make these guys pink. Excessively pink. Perfect for Emperor's Children. The bulk of the work is done. It's time for the finishing steps, like finding all the drug tubes running around their bodies and painting these with layers of greens. There's also a good amount of flayed flesh draped over their armor, and I hit these with a skin color and a glazing of watery red. Nick is really not a fan of the flayed flesh, but I think it's pretty cool. I hit their swords with a silver. These might look like power swords, but they're actually dueling sabers, which are basically chain swords with precision in game. Now that my guys are almost done, I went back in with some dark gray paint and fixed up any mistakes I made. I waited until the very end for this step so that I could hit all my mistakes at the same time. The last thing is finding all these little tassels and painting them bright red and doing my best to pick out the eyes. A bunch of little things, but now these 10 models are all done.
While Sean was finishing up his first squad, I was getting started on mine, hitting my birds with the Black Prime, and then typically I would hit these with the Zenithal of Space Dust, but I have a lot of guys with a lot of skin and I want to try to get them looking good, but without pouring too much time and effort into it. I started by mixing some Space Dust into the Fur Brown and airbrushing this over top of my models, focusing on their muscles. Then I mixed up some lighter Space Dust and really thinned this down, trying to spray this on individual muscles, holding the airbrush really close to the minis. The airbrushing got me pretty far on these Krootox Rampagers, definitely a lot further than my normal technique of just blasting them from above with some Space Dust, and then I have to do everything gets a wash and everything gets a highlight, and it's kind of a lot of highlighting, and that's kind of what I'm trying to avoid. Now I've got a really good base to work up from, but how do I make that pivot from the perfect flawlessness of the airbrush and pivot to the paintbrush and hopefully not have to do too much paintbrushing? ×9. Gotta make it work. I took some Space Dust onto my brush, thinned it down so that it was transparent, and started to speckle this onto their muscles, doing some scratchy dotty highlights. I only covered about 10% of the skin, and it does really punch up the brightness and make the details look crispy. That's one thing the airbrush doesn't do, is give you sharp lines. With the skin highlighted, I thinned down some Bony Matter speed paint and put this all over. This dulled and darkened the highlights a little, making them subtle, matching the airbrush perfection better. And then I reapplied some highlights, focusing on the face and the highest peaks of the muscles. This 1-2 punch worked well, but it did take some time. I feel like it looked really good on the face, but was a little too small on the muscles. So I tried again on the next Kroot, laying down more paint with a bigger brush on the muscles, and then doing a wash and a second round of highlighting. Comparing these two together, on the first one, the highlights are a little bit too small, and on the second one, the highlights are a little bit too big. I think there's a happy medium. And now that I know, I can do the next one, timing myself, to see how long this whole shebang takes. To do all the steps, turns out it takes about 10 minutes a guy, which is not too bad. These guys are big. This isn't the end of the skin though. I grabbed some raw sienna, a semi-transparent ink, and dusted this over the muscles. This further softens the highlights, adds a little bit more saturated color, and brings back a little bit of the airbrush perfection. Looking at this compared to some of my finished carnivores, and it looks good and it didn't take too much time. I took some red speed paint and put this over the feet and hands of my Kroot. This is a detail I have throughout my Kroot flock, and I mixed some pink paint to do some small stripes on the skin to make them look more scaly and bird-like. The skin is all done, and I am very pleasantly surprised it didn't take that long. Probably at like 6 or 7 hours, which is less than an hour per guy. It's getting close, but these are big guys. These are like 5 guys taped together, so I am pretty happy with this skin, and it's pretty colorful. It's not like highlighter pink saturation like Sean's guys, but these guys still got some pretty good color on them.
And speaking of highlighter pink, the infractors are all done. The trim took forever, but the pink always brings me back, so that's good at least. Now on to the flawless blades. They don't have Lucius in the combat patrol, but they still get 3 attacks each, so that's 9 attacks, 2 up, 3 up guaranteed, 2 damage, so the Krootox Rampagers are going to feel the hurt. I want these flawless blades to look very different to the Infractors. I like this alternate color scheme in the pretty picture section of the codex. Let's try that. I started out base coating them a jade green, and then mixed in some white paint and sprayed this from above, covering 90% of the darker green. Then I put more white ink into my airbrush and sprayed this on top, covering up 70% of the previous layers. I want them to have white armor, but a spooky white armor that matches the bases. The base coat is kind of the opposite of the Infractors, but now that these are done, it's time to do the normal things. Hitting all the trim with a gold, I didn't have to do a dark base coat this time since they're already white. So much easier. Then I put a black speed paint over the in-between armor parts, purple on their clothing, and green on all their drugs. Each flawless blade also has a vial of drugs sticking out of the top of their power plants. The flawless blades do carry power swords. These are called bliss blades. I built 3 with 2 small blades and 3 with 1 large blade, and I painted these a metallic purple. After that, it was finding all the little flayed flesh draped over these guys and hitting the tassels with a bright red again. These guys also have some exposed skin, which I picked out with the same color I used on the flayed skin, but instead of a dark red, I washed them with a brighter wash for a healthier look.
While Sean was tackling his 3rd and 4th unit, I started on the leather, and I really like how I do my Kroot leather, with some really nice saturated oranges. I think my best example is on my Lone Spear. This is what I want to replicate. I put white, orange, brown, and black onto my palette, and I started out base coating all the leather with the bright orangey brown. I used watery paint and a big old brush to get this down as fast as possible. Then I went over it with a watery mix of dark brown, slobbering it on and then coming in with a damp brush and pushing it around so it stuck mostly in the recesses. Then I went back in with my orange and re-highlighted, and I mixed some white paint to brighten it up even more, and then I laid on some more highlights. I did a few rounds of this, but I didn't push it too far. I do have 9 more of these guys to do. I did spend some extra time though doing some micro scratches, dragging the point of a sharp brush over the armor, and this little detail got me thinking about another fun detail I could add. I put a stripe running down the armor of a gray, and then I did a highlight of a light gray, and then I finished it off with white to make it look like a white racing stripe, or a Rampager stripe. I did this white stripe on 3 of them, and then I picked out another 3 to get red stripes. With the armor done, I moved on to the saddle parts, doing the same technique of base coating, and then a slobbery dark brown, and then a few layers of highlights with my original leather colors, and then those colors mixed together with white. This took ages, but eventually I was putting some micro scratches on, and the leather on my beasts was done. Now there's just a few little bits left of the Krootoxes, putting black speed paint over their quills, brass knuckles, and the occasional lip ring. I hit the quills in metal with a dry brushing of gray, and then I used one of my favorite things, this Turbo Doric Tin Star in ultra bright metallic silver. I put this over the metal, just a little bit for chips on the weapons and some stripes on their decorations. My flock of Rampagers are done, and they look so big and meaty and chunky and glorious, and I have so many of them. I love the Gnarloks. And Gnarloks are kind of a grimdark thing in 40k. The superpower of the Kroot is that they can eat stuff and then take on the attributes of what they ate. And so the Gnarloks, these guys probably ate a bunch of rhinos and elephants and orcs and just big brute things, and they got incredibly strong. But they lost their sentience. They're kind of just animals, which is kind of creepy to think about. And because like realistically, this is Uncle Larry. This is a guy, but it's not really a guy anymore. And the Kroot keep them around because they're very, very useful, and it's very grimdark. It reminds me of the C.M. Kozman book, All Tomorrows, where an alien species called the Q conquers humanity and then changes humanity into life that they think is appropriate, and it's pretty grim and it's pretty dark. But in that book, humanity isn't on board. The Kroot are very on board for whatever this is. 9 big ol' Kroot boys done, but technically not done because now I need to do the riders. So I gotta do all of this again.
Whew, all done with the flawless blades. I stayed up all night working on them to be sure they were done today. Now to put on some finishing touches, and I want to do some decals. Now I could use these decals that you find in the Games Workshop boxes, or I'm feeling a little fancy. I think I'm going to use these. These have the old symbol for the Emperor's Children on them, and Games Workshop seems to agree that this is the better one based on the merchandise they're putting out recently. So I'm going to go with these. If you want these for yourself, you can find them on EonsOfBattle.com. We have these, we have other decals, basing bits, toppers, and all kinds of other things to help improve your army and make it the best it can be.
And while you're there, this month we have the Faraway Galaxy Bundle. A battlefield's worth of sci-fi buildings with a clever removable door and roof system for easy access. These buildings print easy and are perfect for cutting a battlefield into a dangerous urban maze. There's also plenty of cargo containers and barricades, including the XT6 cargo sled for moving all these accessories around the war zone. This set is perfect for quickly setting up a thematic battlefield on any system, planet, or moon. This set will be on EonsOfBattle.com for the month of July, and then it'll be gone.
These Impatient Tabletop Imperial Children Knights decals are pretty special. They're reflective foil decals. I cut out a number 3 for the 3rd Legion and one of the old-style Emperor's Children symbols and set them to soak in my wet palette with a drop of Microsol decal solution. I had Jay help me with these. I haven't put on too many, and looking at his Black Templar army, he's put on quite a few. He slid them into place and crushed them down flat with a damp paper towel. Once they were on there, I put some gloss varnish over the decals to keep them nice and shiny, and then it was time for the bases. These are Zabavka Workshop's Defeated City bases. These are the most bases I've had to paint up so far, but at least I didn't need to build them, just paint them. After a green base coat, I took out a dried wet wipe and gently tore it up so it was frayed, and then airbrushed through it to get the impression of the fibers onto the bases. This lighter green was step 1, and step 2 was a smaller spray of white through the wet wipe. After a hard night and day of painting, I could finally paint all my base rims black. Whew, all done. That was the first time I did the bases all on my own, so I'm glad they turned out pretty good. I'm all done now, and by the looks of things over there, Jay isn't. I get to go to a party now, so I'll see Jay later.
I thought you were going to a strip club.
It's at the strip club.
I'm just over here scooting and crooting. Sean finished more models than I did, more units than I did, and a lot more points. But in my defense, these guys are bigger. And number 2, I'm taking my sweet time with my Kroot Rampagers. And it doesn't really matter who finishes first anyway, because I'm going to win the Combat Patrol game, and so I just got to keep painting. The riders were easy compared to my Krootoxes. I did them the same way as I did my first 20 carnivores, but on half of them I decided to give them blue skin. This is a thing I've been doing since my heroes. Most of my carnivores will be tan, but for 20 of them I want them with blue skin so that they're the blue man group. It's all the same steps, but replacing bony matter with Raging Sea and then highlights with blue. Other than that, it's the same old, red feet, tan highlights or blue highlights, finding all the little leather bits, and black weapons and quills. Now that the riders are nearing completion, I want to get them stuck down. I've been rubbing off a little bit of paint over handling them, so I grabbed my pictures and matched the riders with their horses using super glue to stick them down. Now I can do some fine tuning while safely holding the models by their bases. I painted the weapons with a coat of black speed paint and then a dry brushing of gray, but before I do the silver, I want to do some freehanding. I painted some markings on their big old cleavers, doing little lines and triangles. I did some markings on their chest armor, and then on the hunting hook guys, I did rings on the handles. Then I broke up the tin star and sponged this on. Now my riders are done, and I almost forgot about their shoulder pads. It's not 40k without big old shoulders. I flipped these around on my paint handles and then primed them with red, making a gradient from bright red to dark red. Then I grabbed some painter's tape and started to carefully mask on some stripes and triangles. This was some work, but was necessary to cover white over red. I took a black paint and carefully painted on some stripes following the shapes of the stenciling. Then I picked out the decorations with silver, and I used NYX black panel liner to shade the Kroot glyphs, and then did some sponging of silver over top of everything. Now to get these attached. The instructions specify which shoulder goes on who, but I decided to ignore that and put them wherever I want. And to do this, I took some Milliput black and made balls of this to stick behind the shoulders, and then I used super glue to squish these into place. I picked whatever shoulder I felt like didn't turn out perfectly in the highlighting stage. Now, it was getting pretty late, but I kept on going, moving on to the bases. I base coated the plants with a green and then a little puff of bright green from above. Then I made up a soupy mix of all the browns I've used on the models, slobbering this all over the ground. For some of these cactuses, they have flowers, and previously I've used Silly Putty to mask these off so that I could airbrush them, but I had another idea. I cut up a playing card so I had 2 pieces with V's in them, and then I can slip these over the flowers, instantly masking them for me. I gave each flower a few squirts, and then a dry brushing of some space dust over the cork, finishing off the base rims with brown. Now I'm the one staying up late painting Warhammer, but it's done! 255 points, a Kroot added to the collection. Now I gotta go to bed, and then I gotta play some Warhammer. It's game day, Sean's back from the strip club, and it's time to see whose army is superior. After deployment, Sean rolled to go first, and I bet he wished he didn't. He moved up with most of his army, but nothing made it into combat. In my turn 1, I moved my Kroot up to make some walls to fend off Sean's charges, and I took some shots with my guns. Unlike Sean, I actually do have some guns, and my guns managed to drop a flawless blade, the first kill of the game. In turn 2, it was Sean's go turn with his army, which was now in range, and they all piled into my carnivore line. Everything charged, everything fought, and all of my Kroot carnivores died. This was problematic, but not unexpected. Now Sean's army is just standing in front of me, ready to get rampaged.
With some buffs from the Lone Spear and stratagems, I wiped his Infractor and Lord Exultant, and my second Rampager squad did some okay damage into his Flawless Blades. He returned the favor, killing a Rampager, but now I've got him where I want him. In turn 3, he tried to be sneaky and run away with a Flawless squad, but I sniped one away in Overwatch. But that last guy was able to run up to my Lone Spear and one-shot him. That sucked, but my remaining Krootoxes finished off the other squad who super died. Sean rolled only ones. In my turn 3, I decided to ignore that last Flawless and run up the board with my remaining models, and I crashed into his Infractors he left in his deployment zone. I killed them down to one man, who put up a surprising amount of fight. In turn 4, Sean's last Flawless Blade did a U-turn and ran up the board to kill my Krootox Rider, but biffed it on the hits again, rolling 3 ones. My Kroot Cavalry continued to run around the board unimpeded, and Sean had one amazing roll trying to save his Flawless from my Rampagers, rolling 6 sixes on the save. But it was the one singular 2 that finished him off. Kroot victory, 35-25, and not an Emperor's Children left on the board. Right after I got done stomping Sean into the ground, we played another game of Combat Patrol, and what happened in that second game?
The power went out.
It did, but what else happened in that game?
I stomped you.
Yeah, in the first game I got the drop on Sean and tabled him. Second game he got the drop on me and tabled me. That's kind of how it goes with close combat armies. And Combat Patrol. But I am incredibly satisfied with my Rampagers. They are the cutest little burbs, and they are the damage potential of my army.
I'm also very happy with how everything turned out here. Especially with these guys, I'm getting a lot better at the pink, and the alternate color scheme turned out really well, so I'm happy for that too.
It's looking like an army now.
I know. It's looking like that almost.
Eventually, this entire side of the board will be Kroot, and then that pile's just gonna get a little bigger. Yeah. I don't know what's next for me. I've got to put together 60 more carnivores. I need some vehicles. I need to add some Tau to this Tau army. I got options.
I'm kind of in the same boat where I need some vehicles. I need to paint more of my normal guys. I have like 30 left, I think. And I need some demon princes. So I could probably kick bash something with that. It'd be fun.
These armies are coming along, and I beat Sean.
And I beat him.
I don't remember that part.
That's because it was in the dark.
It was.